What? I didn't see that coming. So today I've got issue 1 of X-Men Blue Origins. There were a bunch of other Origins issues like Thunderbird and Storm and Phantom X and Magneto and Nightcrawler a while ago. This is the first one we've seen in a while. And it's written by Si Spurrier, who's been handling everything Nightcrawler related for all of House of X, Powers of X. So since 2019, if it's got Nightcrawler, it's written by Si Spurrier. And honestly, he's been handling it really well. Ever since Jonathan Hickman left, Si Spurrier and also Kieran Gillen are the best writers that all of the X-Men books have. And it's not like Spurrier is new to this. He also did a really great run on X-Men Legacy, which focused on David Haller, Professor Xavier's son, also known as Legion. And that was a crazy series, really colorful, a standout book at the time, and a standout book now. And everything he writes in X-Men now is also standout. It's very clear from everything he writes, X-Men related, that he really cares about the history. He's done his research, he cares about the characters, he wants to be true to the characters, and there's a lot to be true too. The X-Men have been around now for 60 years. That's a lot of history. And Mystique, who this book is centered on, has been around for 45 years. Mystique was created in 1978 by Chris Claremont as a villain for Miss Marvel, who then became Captain Marvel. And then shortly after that, he pushed her over into the X-Men books, where he started teasing that maybe Mystique and Nightcrawler are related. They're both blue, and they're both mutants. You don't see a lot of blue mutants. So he teased about it for a while. He was teasing it all the way through he left the book in the early 90s. And if there's any writer that can make you interested in a tease like that for more than a decade, it's Chris Claremont. His character work is legendary. It is above and beyond, consistently. So Spurrier had a lot of history to look at when he wrote this issue of Origins. There was all the teasing that Claremont did throughout the 80s, and then after Claremont was gone, we didn't really hear much about Nightcrawler's origins or his connection to Mystique until Chuck Austin's semi-infamous run on X-Men in the early 2000s, when he introduced us to Azazel, who's basically Nightcrawler but much older and immortal and red and pretty evil and kind of like a hell pirate kind of gross dude. And basically the narrative there was that Azazel and Mystique are the parents of Nightcrawler. But I don't think fans responded to that very well. It was kind of loosely thrown together. And then we didn't hear much about it again until 2015 in the Amazing X-Men storyline by Jason Aaron, when Nightcrawler is rescued from the afterlife by the X-Men, and he has to fight Azazel, and he's a scary pirate hell lord now. And still, in 2015, they have not fully admitted that Mystique is Nightcrawler's mom. It's just very heavily hinted at. So there's all this history that Spurrier has to work with for these characters, and it's a lot. It is a lot of history, but don't let that convince you that you don't know enough to read this story, because this issue is a really great jumping on point. This issue is really accessible for somebody who doesn't know anything about Nightcrawler or Mystique, or really much about the X-Men in general. There's an event that just happened in the X-Men comics that's a big deal and kind of silly, but also kind of cool, and it's another video. That event happened, and we had a similar effect with Mystique that we had with Wolverine after House of M, where Wolverine had all these memories missing, and some of them were fake and you couldn't tell what was what, and then after House of M it was just clear. He had his memories back and he knew exactly what happened. It's the same thing with Mystique here. So she wakes up after this event and she remembers things. But it isn't a retcon. It isn't a retcon because he cares about the history, so he very carefully weaves together all these stories, gives them all their importance, and he just reminds us of them, and then he pulls them together, and it's so cohesive and it feels so natural. And of course these things are related this way. It's really great storytelling. And I can't give away what happens in the issue because it is really a huge reveal. Maybe some people out there would have been able to guess what this is. Like, I guess it's not that far-fetched, but it's just different enough that it's surprising to those of us who have been there since day one. And I've been there since day one. I was there in 1963 when X-Men issue 1 came out. No, not really. But the Chris Claremont, John Byrne era of X-Men is what I grew up reading. That's one of the first series I read. So X-Men is deeply rooted in the way I think about comic books. And it's important to me that the history is respected. And this history is heavily respected. There's tons of Easter eggs for people who know the history, but it also feels inviting and fresh, so if you don't know any of the history, you're gonna be fine. I would talk more about the plot, but really you should just go and get it yourself and read it, because I don't want to give anything away, and it's worth buying. It's worth the $6. It's a little more expensive than most comics right now, but there's a lot in it. There's a lot in here. Go buy it. As far as the art goes, I'm pretty sure that this is Marcus 2. The credits say it's Wilton Santos with Oren Jr. I think that's just the first 3 pages of the story, and then the main main story that takes up most of the book is Marcus 2. Marcus 2 has been with the X-Men for a while now. Since 2019, he's been working on the X books. And his art is good. It's really solid. It's some clean, colorful, inviting art. As far as X-Men books go, it's way up there. There's a lot of X books right now being published with not very good art. But this art is really good. My only nitpicky complaint is that there's not much actual style to it. This is comic book art, and it's really, really well done comic book art, but I don't look at the art and say, oh, that's one of my favorite artists. It's just this idea has been illustrated in a very competent way. And there are other artists who have been working on X-Men books lately who have very recognizable styles, such as Russell Dauterman, Pepe Larraz, Mark Brooks. Marcus 2's art just doesn't quite measure up to those. It's not stylized, it's not recognizable, but it is really clean. You know, this guy is an artist and he knows what he's doing. He's got all the foundation of good art. Sometimes it looks like he's getting into his style, but for the most part, it's not that stylized. And that shouldn't be a big deal. Sometimes people go way too far and have stylized art that just shouldn't be that style because it's really hard to look at. But even though the colors are really pretty here, they're really well done, the inks are really well done, the penciling in general is just a little bit boring. And look, it's not entirely Marcus 2's fault, because Si Spurrier is also notoriously wordy. He has a lot of panels and a lot of dialogue, and it's a lot to cram onto a page, so you don't get a ton of big panels where you can really explore the emotion of a single moment, because there's so many moments you have to have on a page. Spurrier is kind of like Claremont that way. Lots of words. But look, that's just me being picky. This art is really good, and I don't see any reason not to buy this book, because as far as X-Men stories have gone lately, this is one of the most important ones. If you don't buy every X-Men comic coming out, great. You really don't need to. I wish that I was not buying every single one, but for some reason, I am. But this is one of the ones that matters. If you only buy the ones that you think are really important, this is one of them. So I'm gonna rate issue 1 of X-Men Blue Origins 9 out of 10, and that's only because I'm picky. Did you read it? What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Today's question comes from Davey Davidson, and he says, I've heard of Watchmen, and I've heard that Alan Moore is one of the best comic writers on the planet. What other books by Alan Moore are as good as Watchmen? There's a bunch. There is, of course, the classic V for Vendetta. Really great story, and really, really great art, and they still print it on this good paper. So it feels like an actual comic book. If you want something dense and complicated, from hell. This took me a while to start getting invested in, but once I was invested, whoo! Was very invested. This comic will blow your mind. But my absolute favorite by Alan Moore, other than Watchmen, is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Don't watch the movie, it sucks. The comic is way better. It's just got so much good stuff packed into it. It's full of these colorful ideas and really interesting characters, and so many references to literature and history. This is the one. Just don't read Neomicon. For the love of God, don't read that.